You have to draw a line in the sand. You have to build some boundaries.
Maybe I'm not the right one for it.
I'm to a point where I don't want to try anymore.
You are hurting yourself. This is something we see regularly.
What is someone in your life fighting for? And how can you be there for them?
Hi, I'm Dr. Joe Beam, and this is Allison Robinson, who works with us as a client rep at Marriage Helper. You work with people all the time, right?
I do. I get to take a lot of phone calls and just kind of direct people to what we have that can help them.
So what kind of phone calls do you get?
Oh, that's a good question.
Okay, I mean, folks don't know what a client rep is, so
Right.
people call you with what?
Yeah. So basically, I'm the first point of contact when people call Marriage Helper. They get in touch with one of the client relations team, and they're speaking with myself or Amber or Mark or Aaron. And
that's just the team now. We're growing dramatically, but that's what it is today.
Yeah. So we are here to just kind of find out a little bit about what the people are looking for, where they're struggling in their marriage, and then let them know how Marriage Helper can help them. We're directing them to the different resources, whether that's our workshop or coaching or.
So every day we get calls from lots of people whose marriages are in trouble.
Yeah.
And we're not always the best resource for that. And people like Allison, and Allison's extremely good at this, but people like Allison talk to these folks when they call us to listen and understand what the problem is.
Right.
And if we can help, here's how. And if not, here's why we can't be the ones to help you, etc. And so you hear a lot of pain every day, do you not, my friend?
We do, yeah. We hear a lot of pain, and I like to think of it as it's my job to give hope. Because I know when my own marriage was in crisis and reached out to Marriage Helper, that was what spoke to me the most. It was the first time I had talked to someone that had hope for my marriage, and so that's my job. I want to give hope to people.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, later in this program, I want us to talk about that, some of the things, because one of the subjects we're going to talk about today, I believe that you can give some insight to people. Would that be okay?
I will give it a go.
In the program previous to this, we talked about various kinds of affairs and how those affairs occur and some of the stages through which they go, which brought about a whole lot of questions. And as a matter of fact, right, if you're watching us live right now on YouTube, you can be sending in your questions. Allison will be seeing them here, and we'll be picking out as many of those as we can to try to answer here live on this program as we go through. But we want to really continue in the general subject of affairs. Now, that's not all that we help with. It's certainly not all that we deal with, but we deal with a lot of situations where infidelity is involved. And because of that, we maybe do more programs than other subjects, at least right now. We'll start branching out and doing more topics, more subjects, but it's a thing we get asked most about. And so, Allison, as we start into this program, which is kind of a continuation of the last one that I did with Kimberly Holmes, our CEO, where do we start with this?
All right, so today we're gonna start talking to. Let's talk to the person who is married but says that they are in love with someone else.
Okay, and what do we want to talk about with that person?
Maybe just a little bit about, why they are thinking that way. To people not in an affair, and when I know this was new to me. That the whole concept of limerence and all of that, I knew nothing about it. So maybe just explaining a little bit about what the person who is going through the affair, what they're thinking.
Okay. Now, the reason that I can speak to this very specifically is because many, many years ago, I left my wife, Alice, for another woman. We actually divorced. I divorced Alice to be with the other woman. 3 years after divorcing Alice, we put it back together and I remarried her, and we've been married, at the time of this recording, in a couple of weeks it'll be 31 years. But it does put me in a position where that I understand a lot about what people feel and what they're going through because I've been there. The thing, Allison, to remember is that there are different kinds of extramarital affairs, and for some people who are watching us, the extramarital affair, if you're the one who is in it, for some people it's primarily because of the fact of, it's sexually motivated.
Right.
Sometimes people talk about things that they call sex addicts, for example. As a sexologist, I don't use that phraseology. I don't call people sex addicts. And I don't need to get into all the reason to explain why. If people want to use that phrase, it doesn't bother me whatsoever. But I prefer to talk about people who have compulsive sexual problems. Okay. And there are some great resources out there. And if your infidelity, if your affair is based on the fact that you have a sex drive that seems to be out of control, in the sense that you're constantly looking for new partners, then we can help you with your marriage. But when it comes to that particular aspect, you're really going to need to find some help beyond what we do. Now, we can help you, and we have coaches that'll do all kinds of great things for you. As a matter of fact, a little later, we'll tell you more about our coaches. But you can go to some websites such as, if you want a secular resource to help you, go to sexhelp.com, SEXHELP.com. It's not a porn site. It's actually associated with Patrick Carnes, who's kind of like the granddaddy of the guys and gals who deal with sex addicts, if you want to use that phrase. And on there, you can actually take one of their tests to see if you are what they would call a sex addict. Actually, for those of you who are married to a person that you think may or may not be a sex addict, there's a test you can actually take on your spouse on that same site. And then they can refer you to counselors and therapists that they've trained around America, that they validate, they have vetted, they've trained them. They say, these are people that can help you with that. If you prefer a religious source, there's one that's outstanding. It's great. It's called XX Church. Actually, it's 3 X's. XXXchurch.com. Pretty sure it's .com. You might want to check .org. I should have checked it before we came on the air. But it's XXX Church. Yep. XXXCHURCH. And I'm pretty sure it's .com. If not, try .org. And they come at it from a faith-based perspective. And they've got some great materials for both husbands and wives.
They do.
But you know, because you talk to the people on the phone, that the kind of affair that we most often deal with is not just sexual. As a matter of fact, didn't start that way typically.
Right.
Started as a relationship. So if that's you, if you're the person who is involved with somebody else, like I never ever would have thought that I was the guy who would have cheated on his wife or the gal who would have cheated on her husband, and yet here I am in this situation where I am, quote, madly in love with this other person. That's the one that we see most often, and that's the one that we deal with most often. I understand the tremendous amount of emotion that you feel. I also know that you, in all likelihood, did not mean to get into this situation. It started off as a friendship. You guys communicated with each other, and in the course of that, you found yourself attracted to him or her, of course, and it was reciprocal. Attraction came back the other way. But as you were communicating with each other, you began to be very, at least over time, begin to be very transparent, very open, very honest with each other, even more so at some point than you are now with your spouse. You may have been that open and transparent with your spouse somewhere back along the line, but now it's with this person. And as you've shared your fears, your dreams, your weaknesses, your strengths, your frustrations, your desires, as you talk so openly and honestly, it's like nobody in my life have I ever been able to explain myself to who got me, who understood me like this person does. It's like, and I think that's where people in the modern day time use the phrase soulmate. If you go back into mythology, soulmate meant something totally different. But I think now they use the word soulmate to refer to the fact that it's like this person was made for me. I was made for him or made for her. And this connection is just absolutely beyond description. I can't even explain it to other people because I don't know if anybody else has ever felt what I felt or what I'm feeling now. And it becomes this intense relationship that almost always becomes sexual, but not always. Sometimes it stops short of that. We typically call those things emotional affairs. But the sex then is not really about the sex. Although, and I'm talking now to the people who are in this situation, if it has become sexual, you have felt a deeper sexual connection than you have felt in some time. But it's not really because of the sex. It's because of that emotional development that you've already created with each other, where you really are trying to connect in every shape, fashion, or form. And you're thinking, wow, nobody else has even felt this before. I can't even begin to describe what this feels like. I'm in love beyond anything I knew that love could be. By the way, if you're the spouse listening and watching, and I'm describing your spouse right now, I know that you don't like what I'm saying. I know that you're thinking, good grief, just rip my heart out and stomp on it. I mean, that's kind of how you felt at one time. If I've been saying that to you, right?
Yeah, it was definitely just gut wrenching. But I will tell you that at the same time as that it's so hard to hear, I felt relief because it showed me that I wasn't the only one. Because so many times we're going through these things and we're thinking, you know, we're the only one that's experienced this pain. We're the only one who our spouse is saying these horribly hard things to. So the first time that I, heard about Marriage Helper and read the resources online, and my gut reaction was relief because it was the thing with limerence and these relationship affairs is it's almost just like a textbook checklist that you can go down with things that people say.
Yeah, and I'm glad it gave you hope, and I'm glad you guys put it back together. I really am. I'm not only like you, I like your husband. I really do. He's a neat guy. But at the time, I considered killing him.
The thought crossed my mind once or twice.
Not because of what he felt, but because sometimes those of us who are in that situation can do some mean things. Now, I'm not saying that he necessarily did mean things to you, but I definitely did mean things to Alice. If you're thinking, what do you mean? Well, again, I'm talking now to the person in the situation. Allison's mentioned already a couple of times the word limerence. I'm probably not going to talk a lot about that in this particular session. You can find out more about that on our website, marriagehelper.com, marriagehelper.com. We've done all kinds of podcasts and everything else about it. But right now, since I'm talking to you who feels this, I know what you're feeling because I felt it. And I don't know how strong and powerful it was. And if anyone at that time in my life had looked at me and said, that's not love, I would have told them what they were full of. And it would have been a southern pronunciation of a word. And I would have been very clear. You don't get it. This is love. And it is. It is a kind of love. And again, to the spouses who's, my spouse is in this thing, don't tell me he or she loves that person. One thing we will always do is tell the truth, even when it's painful. We just don't know any other way to do it, to be what we're supposed to be and to help you. It is a kind of love, but if you're the person who's in it right now, and I understand and I know the intensity of what you're feeling, I'm going to tell you something that you're not going to believe right now, probably. Don't want to believe and think, if somebody's full of something, it's you, Dr. Beam, because you don't get it. Actually, I do get it. I've been there. I know what it feels like. Not only that, and since then I've dealt with thousands and thousands of couples, and let's just say individuals like you who've been there. And in the social sciences, we can actually measure and identify different kinds of love. Now, I don't want to get into that now. It's not really what we need to talk about. Let's just say we can measure different kinds of love. One kind of love we don't ever try to measure is what people call true love. And the reason we don't try to measure that is because true love is whatever a person feels at the moment. And since that's so unique and so individualized, it's not something in the social sciences we can actually measure. So we have other names for different aspects of it. And as Allison alluded to, the kind of love that you feel right now, the word we use for that is limerence. So not going to describe limerence so much, just to tell you that hopefully by what I've said so far, you know that I understand what you're feeling. And know, first of all, from experience, but if it were just my experience, that would be an anomaly. Not just my experience, but the experience of thousands and thousands of people with whom we have worked, and tons and tons of research in the social sciences, some of my own, and some from people all around the world. As a matter of fact, recently I've been reading back through another few hundred articles I've downloaded that mention the word limerence and looking to see what else people have found and discovered. There's a lady named Helen Fisher. She's an anthropological biologist, for example, PhD, Dr. Fisher, who's done a lot of research about it as well. And we know that what you're feeling is real, and it is a kind of love, but we know for a fact it's going to end. Now, I know you don't believe that, or if you do believe it, you don't want to believe it because of the fact, but no, nobody's ever felt like this, and I'm going to feel like this for the rest of my life. And I know that's what you're thinking and feeling. I do. I get it. Like I said, been there. Don't need to keep telling you that, but I have been there. But one thing about this kind of love, and the reason we can actually put a name to it and measure it, is because it inevitably has an end. And there's some reasons for it biologically. There's some reasons for it in terms of anthropology. There's even reasons for it if you're an evolutionist. Don't have time to explain all that right now, except to say we know that what you're feeling right now, that's amazing if you're in the middle of it, will at some point begin to fade. Not only yours, but the person with whom you are, quote, madly in love, end quote, that person, it will actually at some point begin to fade with him or her as well. And when it comes back down, you're going to start looking at things differently than you do now. So here's the message I hope that you hear and believe, or at least will consider. The decisions you make when you're in the height of that emotion that you're feeling right now, thinking, I'm making decisions because this is the way I'm going to feel for the rest of my life, is not really the way it's going to be. You're making a decision thinking this is the way I'm going to feel for the rest of my life, and the documentation is ample. The experiences of others is plentiful. I know you believe you're going to feel like that for the rest of your life, but you're not. And then when you get down here, when that intensity finally fades, and it will, when it does, you're going to look back at the decisions you made up here and realize that some of the decisions you made thinking you were going to feel like this, or that the other person was going to feel like this forever, led you to make some decisions that caused you pain in where you're going to be, and pain for other people that care about you and love you. Now, I don't have time to explain all of that. I'm hoping that I'm saying enough about it that at least you get intrigued and want to know more. And if you want to be sending some questions in to ask us about it, we'd be glad to answer those questions if we can. And we'll talk about some other things as well as we go through this. But what I'm trying to tell you is, I know. As a matter of fact, many people on our staff know because they have been right where you have been. And even people like Allison here knows because that's where her husband has been, that she's, and both he and she are open and transparent to talk about. And if you ever want to talk to somebody who is not going to be judgmental toward you, who's going to try to understand. You say, well, what if I call and I get Allison and she was the spouse and her husband went through that, she won't be compassionate. I think that you will you not?
Oh, I have huge compassion. I had compassion for my husband when he was walking through it. And it's another one of the great things that I've learned through Marriage Helper. And the question is, is your spouse a good person doing a bad thing, or a bad person doing a bad thing? And I quickly could answer that I knew my husband was a good person doing a bad thing. And
you understand, from Allison's standpoint, the bad thing was he's cheating on me. So
yes.
You understand how she would say that, right? Okay,
right,
yes,
ahead. He was cheating, yes. And so we absolutely have compassion for anyone that calls in and is seeking advice, because we know that, you're in a hard spot. You're seeking help and you're looking for answers. And, it's our job to point you in the, give you resources to help guide you and point you in a direction of hopefully towards reconciliation for your marriage. But there's no judgment at all.
Well, we hope that's what happens because
right.
That's why we exist. But at the same time, we don't try to force you to do that either.
Right.
We try to understand what you feel, and most of us here do, and we will help you with all the resources we possibly can. And of course, our nonprofit exists to help people reconcile their marriages. But if you call us, we're not going to twist your arm to do that. We're going to offer you a lot of really good resources and a
right.
lot of understanding, but we're going to accept you making your own decision. Now, if you're the other spouse watching going, well, what good is that? You're not going to help me at all.
Right.
Understand that we also help you and we care about you. And by the grace of God, if you wound up coming to our workshop, for example, we've been doing that particular workshop since 1999. Now, it continually gets better because we continually add new stuff to it as we learn more.
Yeah.
So it's not exactly the same workshop it was in 1999. It's a better workshop than it was in 99. But what we see is that, according to some research done by a professor at Augusta State University, is that 7 years later, 77% of those couples are still together. So it does help people solve their problems, work things out, and stay together. So if you're the spouse thinking, where's my hope? What we offer actually does that for 3 out of 4 couples that come to our workshop. But if you're the spouse who's saying, but wait a minute, I'm not going to come there for you guys to beat me up and make me stay married, that's not our approach. Our approach is to understand you, to accept you as you are, to teach a lot of good things from which we hope you make your decisions, but we're going to be your friends and love you no matter what. So if it sounds like I'm talking out of both sides of my mouth, I'm not. It's just something that works by accepting what people feel
Right.
rather than telling them what to feel.
Right.
Teaching rather than commanding, this is what you have to do.
Right.
We don't use guilt. We don't beat people up. We're all for saving marriages, but if you're the person who's in the affair, you're never going to find a group of people anywhere, I don't think, that'll understand you better than we do and who'll be kinder and nicer to you and respectful to you any more than we are. And if your other spouse is saying, but I want to save the marriage, what about me? We also are on your side just as much, and we'll do all we can to help you guys do that, but never in a heavy-handed way.
No, that's what the workshop is such, I don't know any other word to describe it, but it is such a safe environment for everyone that walks in, whether, no matter which side of you're on for your marriage, whether you're standing for it or whether you're got, both feet out the door. That's the thing that we hear over and over again with the people that come to our workshop is, no one is here to twist your arm. We're here just to present information to you, and what you do with that is completely up to you. So yeah, it's an incredible environment that's created at the workshops.
Right. Now, you've been able to look at some of the questions that have been coming in. Are there any specifically on this topic before we move to the next that you think that we need to stop for right now? Or have you had a chance to keep up over there? I keep interrupting you and asking you questions, so maybe you haven't had a chance to look and see.
Okay, let me read this question here. I know today is not about limerence specifically, but I know you have said that long distance can extend limerence. My wife's limerent object lives halfway across the country. My current job ends in 6 weeks. My wife has blocked a couple jobs because she doesn't want to live in their locations, and I don't want to leave my 2-year-old son. I have a great career opportunity. It would move us across the country, 1 hour from the limerent object. Wife has agreed to move. Is taking the job a really bad idea, or could moving closer to the limerent object potentially quicken the limerence process for my wife?
Okay. The difficulty in teaching about things is that sometimes people don't grasp all the nuances of what we teach, and that makes all the sense in the world. And sometimes can just take, well, I heard you say this, and does this how that applies? In a minute, I'll tell you about our coaches, because sometimes the best thing to do is that you actually call and you get a deal where that you talk to one of our coaches. What I mean by that is somebody who can actually listen to your specific situation, understand the specifics of what you're going through and facing. And then our coaches, we have male coaches and female coaches, then our coaches can help you think through the best decision that you make. Because I know that when I teach in these big principles, sometimes it's like, yeah, but how does it apply to this? All right, well, let me try to answer this question if I may. What's being referred to here is the fact that from the research, we know that limerence typically ends in one of 3 ways. Not only does the social science research say this, but our experience bears it out. Not just my experience, but thousands of people we work with, we see that it pretty well happens this way. Limerence typically ends in one of these 3 ways. Now, limerence is this sense or feeling of being madly in love with this other person. Now, as we go through that, and remember that level of intensity of love, it's an obsessive kind of love. Because, again, if you're the person who's in that, you know what I'm talking about. You think about your love object, your limerent object, if you want to use the social science words, the person that you're in love with. You think about this person a lot, up to 85% of your working hours, to the point where that you're typically obsessive about him or her. You're somewhat jealous of him or her because of the fact that you don't want that person to be with anybody but you. And when that person appears to be happy with you, you're in ecstasy. Whenever you wonder if she or he is happy with you, you're in misery. And you are hypervigilant and watching for any sign, any nuance of what he or she says, the expressions on his or her face, whether or not they agree to meet with you at a certain time. And even if they give a very valid excuse for not going, you're wondering, does it mean, is it possible, is she leaving me? And so there's a great deal of fear in this kind of intensive love that we refer to as limerence. And again, you can go on our website, Marriage Helper, marriagehelper.com, and find out a lot about that. But now, in answer to that question, that kind of love, that that emotion we call limerence typically ends in one of three ways. One is you wind up together, because one of the strong things that drives the intensity of this emotion is the fear that you're not going to wind up together. And that fear intensifies the passion part of that. Well, if you actually wound up together and there's no more obstacles out there between the two of you, for example, if you had divorced your spouse to be with this person, if now you're married to this other person, this person you've been madly in love with, those intense emotions begin to fade. And they don't drop like off a cliff, but they begin to fade because part of what really drove it was that fear. As a matter of fact, that's actually a major factor of it. And when that fear finally subsides, like we're together, then those intense emotions begin to go away. That's why people who get down here typically have some problems with the person that they were madly in love with before, because up here all kinds of things are going on. Like up here you don't see their flaws, they're almost perfect. Down here you do. Up here you don't mind whatever you have to give up to be with them. You'll pay any price to be with them. If that means divorce, lose your career, not be with your children, whatever, you want to be with this person. Down here those things begin to matter. And so when you finally get together, that's one of the ways it goes away. As a matter of fact, that's the most common, powerful way. If they get together, it's going to go away. Not overnight, but it will. The second is if the other person ceases to reciprocate. What I mean, at some point, if the other person just stops being in limerence with you, if he or she ever was, and if that person then begins to pull away from you, and you'll first intensify going after him or her, you'll fight hard to get him or her back. But if indeed that occurs, then limerence will go away just because of the fact that eventually it extinguishes itself because there's no positive feedback from the other person. I'm sorry, I got to talk in psychology there. It eventually goes away because the other person doesn't have it back for you. The third way, and I hate talking about this because it freaks people out and they start making assumptions they don't need to make, but the third way would be those rare people that I call Limor Addicts, which means that every 3 to 5 years they're in a brand new relationship. Every 3 to 5 years they're going to continue to be in a new relationship because they like the ecstasy of what this feels like. So back to the question the gentleman asked. He said, okay, you said if they're apart, it takes longer for it to go away. That's true, because understand that longing, that hope, if they're together, it goes away faster. So pulling them apart, and they're not together anymore, like one's way over here and one's way over here, does elongate the process to some degree. Okay, I get that. So he's saying, well, she's willing to move away, but that's going to make those emotions last a little longer, right? Probably. Understand, people are individuals. We can't always say right, but probably, yeah, it'll make the emotions go a little longer. So he's saying, well, should then I just keep her close to him so it goes away faster? In my opinion, no, don't do that. Because here, yes, it might be that the limerence doesn't last as long, but it's also probably that it's going to be more intense because of the proximity to the person. So if I were having to choose between those two things, if it were, now you make your own decisions, but if I were in that situation, then if she's willing to move, I'd move. Now, I can't guarantee you what's going to happen. People are all different. But no, I don't think it makes things worse. It will probably elongate the emotions that she feels in terms of time, but not necessarily in terms of intensity. Where staying over here might actually increase it in terms of intensity. Allison, did I make any sense whatsoever with what I just said?
You did.
Okay.
I think you got around and you answered the question. So you're good. We're going to cut to a quick break. We want you all to hear just a little bit about the amazing coaching that we do here through Marriage Helper.
You know, a lot of times when we're facing situations in life, we find ourselves confused. It's not because we don't know options or have options. Rather, it's because there's so many options out there to choose from. My name is Jim Porto, and I am one of the coaches here at Marriage Helper. All of my clients seem to make that statement. Comments like, Jim, what's next? Jim, how do I move from here? And the truth is, there are thousands of books and podcasts and papers out there that'll tell you what you need to do next. There's one problem with all of those. They don't know you. They don't know what you're going through as an individual. They don't know the particulars of how you're wired and your spouse is wired. This is where a coach can really come in and be valuable to your next step in your relationship. Not only do we have the training and ability to help you take your next step, but we're able to tailor it to where you are and how you've been created. Not only that, to the space and time that you're currently in. One of my mentors told me a long time ago, he said, right thing, wrong time, you won't get the right result. We want to help you take the next step, the step you need to get where you want to go. I want to encourage you to give us a call here at Marriage Helper. Let us help you take the right next step at the right time.
Okay. Yeah, we can't say enough about our amazing coaches here through Marriage Helper. If you'd like more information on that, please contact us at the office, and we will, or send an email, and we will be glad to get you in touch with one of our coaches.
Understand that our coaches are trained. They're certified by us. And like we say on this program all the time, we know that people say, but what about here? And what about that? And having somebody who's been trained, who understands this, that can help you think those things through, is crucial. Please take advantage of that.
Yeah, absolutely. I have worked with so many clients through Marriage Helper that just the coaches have made a world of difference in their life, and they love the coaching that happens here. Okay, I have a quick testimony I'm going to read here. This is from Miguel, and it says, I, Miguel, was the one that wanted out of my marriage in 2014. I had lots of wounds from my childhood that led me to having an emotional affair and sexual affair via the internet. The plan was to leave my family. As I came out of limerence and decided to fight for my marriage, my wife became the one having an affair. By this time, I had started to apply the principles I was learning from Marriage Helper. Lots of things made sense, and I was able to start working on my own issues, understanding that there is no magic pill that will make things go away or get better. You have to do it by yourself one day at a time. As I gained knowledge and became stronger, my wife came forward and confessed her own affair, and thus her own journey started. Today, 3 years later, we have been able to heal most of our wounds and have gained the understanding that marriage is work, mercy, grace, forgiveness, and love. And most important, we have fallen in love with the real person that we both are as individuals. It used to be where we were married because we had to be. Now we are married and together because we want to.
Great.
Every day we learn something new, and every day we apply what we have learned from Joe, Alice, Jim, Terry, and well, all of them. We hope that one day we can use our story to help others. And know this, there is always hope. Love in Christ, Iris and Miguel. Thank you so much for sharing your testimony.
Yes.
And your story is already helping other people. So we have some great Marriage Helper swag here that is going to be...
Swag? Is that the word for this now?
Yep, it's swag. It's going to be coming your way, Iris and Miguel. So thank you so much.
So these t-shirts, what do they say on there?
This one is, I love my husband.
Oh, that's a good one.
And I love my wife.
Awesome. Yeah. Why does that look like prison letters? That's what I'm wondering.
I didn't create it. I don't know.
It's not a prison letter if you love your wife. Okay.
Okay. So how can...
And when people send in testimonies, we try to read one every time we do one of these programs.
Yes. So send us...
And we'll always send the shirts.
Yes. Send us your testimonies to live@marriagehelper.com. We would love to read your testimony as well.
Cool.
So, okay. So we've talked to the person who is in an affair. Now, can we talk to the person who would be what my position was, the standing spouse, who has, just found out their husband or wife is in an affair? What do they need to do? How can we help their emotions?
Well, that's such a broad topic, I think, Allison, that it would take an entire program just to talk about that. So maybe we could just cut it down to one thing for this program.
Okay.
Sometimes people are like, okay, I don't understand how in the world he can feel what he feels or she feels what she feels. I have no way to relate to that, and therefore he or she must be the worst person on the planet. Well, so when we talk about that then, how to at least try to understand what your spouse is feeling.
Yeah.
Would that be a okay part, just, and rather than a broader question, which we can do, and I'm happy to in a whole program, but kind of tie that in. So for example, with your husband, how did you have some empathy for him when he was doing something that was so painful to you?
honestly, it was so out of character for him, that I knew that that was not who he truly was. And so it enabled me to see him in a different light. That was not the person that I was married to. I knew that he, like I said earlier, I knew that he was a good person doing a bad thing. And I instantly had the reaction that I never thought that I would. You know, everyone, I feel like most people have the understanding, like, if my spouse ever cheats on me, I will, I got my foot out the door. Like,
Right.
no
It's
way.
done, it's over.
Yep,
Yeah.
no way would I ever put up with that. And I am guilty of that. I said the same thing. And when it instantly became my situation, that never even crossed my mind, because I knew that my marriage was worth it. I knew that this was not who my husband was, and I was going to stick around and fight it out as long as I could. So initially, it was just seeing him, just kind of viewing him as this person who was stuck in something. I now know it's limerence, but you know, I wanted to do all that I could to help him, you know, see. But it took me being a safe place, which was not easy.
Yeah, I'm sure it's not. I'm sure it's not. Now, if you understand what Allison's saying, and you might be thinking, good grief, she's a whole lot stronger than I am. Well, she is a strong person. There's no doubt about that. But what we have found with many people, I mean, thousands upon thousands of people, is that they typically are a lot stronger than they even knew they were. I'm not in any way putting down Allison's strength. She is amazingly strong. But you probably have that within you as well. And the question that Allison's referred to a couple of times, let me just elaborate a tad, because sometimes people would ask me, you know, should I try to say this or not? My response always is, it's your decision. I mean, the fact that your spouse has cheated on you gives you the right, if you wish, to divorce him or her and move on with your life. You can do that if you wish. But then I'll ask them a question. But because of the fact that obviously if my spouse is cheating on me, I see that as a bad thing. I ask, is this, as Allison's already said, a good person doing a bad thing or a bad person doing a bad thing? You see, if your spouse is somebody that's, and I've got to be careful how I say this. I'm not trying to get you to think your spouse is a sociopath or psychopath or a narcissist. There are all kinds of people in your world who will tell you that's what your spouse is. People who have no idea what your spouse is, but they have all the answers. I don't want to join that crowd, because those people do a whole lot more harm than good. We've even heard marriage counselors predict somebody's or diagnose somebody's spouse as being a sociopath, or diagnosing a spouse as being a narcissist, for example. And when we say, how many sessions did that counselor have with your spouse? Well, she never met my spouse, or he never met my spouse, and yet diagnosed your spouse as a narcissist? Yeah, run. Get away from that person. He or she doesn't have a clue what they're doing. They're certainly not professional, and they're definitely not ethical. So I'm not here to try to do that, to try to convince you that your spouse has some kind of emotional or psychological or spiritual sickness. But I do accept the fact that there are some people whose concept of integrity, their concept of right and wrong has never been the kind of person that you should have been with. And if that person's doing a bad thing, if you try to rescue him or her, they're going to do another bad thing. It's not your job to develop your spouse into a person of integrity. That was a job of his or her parents or whoever helped bring him up. And if you're quite convinced, no, this person's just done one bad thing after another, doesn't show any remorse, has no feelings of consequence, and therefore is repetitive in his or her actions, then I'm not going to be the one to encourage you to try to salvage that. Because if the person is like that and continues to be like that, I don't know what you can do. You say, well, wait a minute, then if the person's not like that, well, like Allison's husband, who's really a good guy. Yeah, he's got charisma, very likable. Certainly nothing wrong with him in the sense of what I was just talking about, but he did something he shouldn't have done. And it hurt Allison, obviously, as you understand. But did you hear what she said? She said, I knew that wasn't the man I married. Now, those are the kind of people that obviously you can still divorce. But if you think to yourself, is this person worth rescuing? And if I can help rescue him or her, what kind of marriage can we have? Now you understand, I typically won't go on the Today Show and say what I'm about to tell you. I typically don't go on the radio and say it either. Where we say if you survive something like this, if your marriage actually gets past an extramarital affair and you put the marriage back together the way it should be put together, typically, as a matter of fact, almost universally, the marriage is better than it was before the affair. Not because of the affair, but because of what you both learned through the affair, like how it started, what happened, how you got past it, etc. And the reason I typically don't say that on national television is so some idiot doesn't go, oh, then I should have an affair to make my marriage better. Because I'll guarantee you, some idiot out there would think like that. I hope that you don't. And so if he or she is worth rescuing, then here's what we recommend, if you can, that you do if you want to try to rescue this spouse. First, accept the fact that what he or she is doing is not all your fault. Don't start blaming yourself like, what if I had done that, if I'd done this, if I'd done the other. Now, I doubt seriously that you're perfect, because I've never met a perfect person yet. And I'm sure there's some things you just screwed up. Accept the fact that you did. Learn about what you did that you screwed up, because that's going to need to be fixed. But it doesn't justify your spouse being involved with another person. Even if you're not perfect, it doesn't justify your spouse's decision to do things that are a violation of the marriage covenant, okay? The contract, whatever you want to call it, based on how you think about it. So don't take responsibility for things you didn't do, but be willing to take responsibility for the things you did. Now, the next part of that is try your best to understand as much as you can that your spouse probably didn't do this because he or she was wanting to hurt you. That he or she got into this, particularly if it's a relationship affair, the kind of affair that we most often talk about. In other words, it's not just a sex thing. It's actually a connection he or she got with the other person. They probably didn't go looking for that. Maybe they did, but in all likelihood they didn't. Were there some vulnerabilities there? Yeah, there had to be. Could it be that some of what you did may actually have intensified those vulnerabilities a little bit? Yeah, that's possible, but it still doesn't justify what they did. But if they got into that way, even if they're doing something now that's wrong, like having the affair, and even if, like people often do in affairs, if they've gotten mean toward you, pointing out all your idiosyncrasies, weaknesses, saying mean things about you, mean things to you, accusing you of things, even saying things like, I never loved you, or I love you, but I'm not in love with you, all the kind of things we hear all the time. As best you can, try not to take that personally. Oh, I know. That's going to be so hard to do. But as best you can, try not to take it personally. Understand that's what he or she's going through. And if you can continue to be, as Allinson just described, that safe place in the sense of, even though I'm hurt, what I'm going to try to do is to be the person that, if anything works, will rescue my husband or wife and bring him or her back to who they used to be, only hopefully better than they were. And by doing that, then you're trying to understand what he or she feels, even if you don't like it. And here's the hard part: to accept what he or she feels, even if it hurts you to accept it. Denying the fact that he or she feels a connection with that other person is not going to make it go away. Thinking even that if he or she went away, that this would fix everything, is not necessarily it either. Just try to understand right now, he, she, my husband, my wife, has an emotional connection that my spouse thinks is the most wonderful thing in the world. And even though I don't like that, even if I can't completely understand it, I'm trying to, I need to accept that that's the way he or she feels. Because if you can accept that's how that person feels now, then you can find within you the strength to be that safe place that hopefully at some point is going to lead him or her back. Now, just being the safe place is not enough to bring him or her back. There are other things you need to do as well. But obviously we can't explain all those things in every program that we do. That's why we suggest that you go to our website, marriagehelper.com, or you call our office and you can find our telephone number on our website. And if you go there, you can see how to contact us either by email or by phone and talk to people like Alice and our client reps who will listen and understand and can tell you how we can help if we're the ones who can help. She and her compatriots in our organization will help you understand that. Now, if you just want to get mad and get rid of him or her, you can. But that's not going to help things. And if you decide at times, I'm just really going to pop him or her, like, You're a scum. Let me tell your mom and dad how bad you are. Let me tell our kids that you're evil. You obviously can do that, but now you're not just hurting the possibilities of putting this marriage back together, but now you're hurting your spouse in ways that are going to last a long time. And if you're, like, for example, involving his parents, her parents, your children, you're damaging people that don't need to be damaged.
Right. Right.
You concur?
I do. I want to transition to a question here that we had emailed in. A lot of people have questions about the valley. And I know you have referred to it before in different podcasts and some of the resources. So I'm going to read this email. So this person has been married for 24 years. They have 2 daughters. His wife has been having an affair for about 15 months. And he says that he and his wife are now basically living as roommates. She says that she doesn't love him, nor was she ever really in love with him. And she does want to end the affair, but she keeps putting it off. So she's home still. They're living together. He says actually their relationship is better than it's ever been. But she still has this other person that says she's going to cut it off, but she doesn't. So she also says she wants to keep the other man as a friend. He feels like they are now stuck, and he is enabling her bad behavior. So what advice do we have here?
Okay, as you refer to it, we call it the valley. Maybe there could be better names for it, but that's the name I came up with a few years ago, and it makes sense to me, so I just call it the valley. It works. The valley is when you're between 2 things. You say, what do you mean? Well, this particular woman in this question, for example, is between 2 things. Here's her husband. He's the mountains, if you will, on this side, and here's her lover, and he's the mountains, if you will, on this side, and she's in the valley. The valley means that a person has a relationship with both. And because of where he or she is, in this case, we'll just talk about the woman, so because of where she is, she doesn't really have to make any decisions right now. In other words, she can just keep going right down the valley. I've got what I want with my lover over here, but I've also got what I want with my husband over here because I'm still living at home. Now, did it say whether or not Allison, if they had children? I didn't hear that.
They do have children.
So I'm at home, so I'm with my kids. My kids also have their dad here. So it's, my kids are probably better off than if I left and went with the other guy. As a matter of fact, it's not just probably, it's definitely they're better off than if she left and went with the other guy. And I'm getting along better with my husband than I ever have, but I'm still having this guy over here that fulfills some other needs that I have. So the valley, 15 months. The valley means I seem to have the best of both worlds right now, at least enough that I don't feel compelled to have to do anything. That's what we call the valley. Now, is that enabling? Potentially, but not necessarily. Let me see if I can explain this where it makes some sense. My encouragement, and of course, you always make your own decisions. For example, if you call and talk to some of our coaches, and I'd really, truly hope that you take advantage of our coaches, they're not going to tell you what to do. Why? Because they don't have to live with your consequences. You make your decisions because you're the one that has to live with whatever those decisions lead to. Therefore, we'll help you think things through. We'll explain lots of things to you, but ultimately it's your decision. We don't have the right to make your life decisions for you. By the way, neither does your family or your friends. They don't have that right either. And particularly people on Facebook who always know what you should do. Don't listen to those people. Make your own decisions, but get as much good information as you can beforehand. Now, when people ask me then, I say this, there can be a value of staying in the valley for a while. Let me say it differently. There can be a value of letting your spouse stay in the valley for a while. You say, what do you mean? Okay, she's still at home. Their relationship, based on what you read for me there, Allison, their relationship actually is getting better. Now, the reason that you would allow somebody to stay in the valley without making something happen is if you feel that there's progress being made toward you. Okay, so if the relationship is getting better, then there's some progress being made there. Right. So the point where, if I understood what you said there, that she has even on occasion mentioned ending it with the other guy. Now she hasn't, but she's talked about it. Okay, right. Meaning that he apparently is rebuilding a relationship with her. Right. Could there be value then of letting her stay in that valley for a while that relationship develops? And the answer to that is yes, there can be, because of the fact that at least now you're having contact. Whereas if you just, boom, that's it, you're done, you're out of here,
Right.
you might stop that altogether. And now she just focuses on the other guy, and that becomes the be all end all. And then that pretty well leads to the end of the relationship. Now, you might be thinking, so you just let them stay in the valley forever? And the answer is no. I don't think that's wise either. So what I'm about to describe, Allison, is more of an art than a science.
Okay.
Okay. The science would be, when this happens, this is what you do. An art is, I've got to figure out this thing, if that makes any sense.
Right.
All right. So usually what I say is, if you can, and it's always your decision, but if you can, you allow the person to stay in the valley if there is progress being made with you. But at whatever point damage begins to occur, now understand there's a difference in hurt and damage. Hurt is, I feel pain. Well, my guess is you feel pain right now. You felt pain through this whole 15 months. Here's the woman that you love, and she's emotionally connected to somebody else. That hurts. So I'm not talking about just pain. Pain we know is there. But when it starts being damaging, then it's time to do something. We use the acronym PIES to explain a lot of things, so let me use the acronym PIES here. It stands for physical, intellectual, emotional, spiritual. Physical, intellectual, emotional, spiritual. If her being in this valley starts doing physical damage to anybody, then it'll be time to make something happen differently. You say, what do you mean? Well, for example, let's say that her health starts to fail because of the tension that she's in. Let's say that your health does physically. Let's say that now you're fatigued all the time, or you or she, you're going into full-fledged depression. I mean, it's getting down there where that you find it difficult to work and those kinds of things. Or you're beginning to get sick because that tension is beginning to have a negative influence on your immune system, and so you're beginning to catch everything that comes along, every little cold or whatever. If that's happening to her, to you, to your children, if there's physical damage being done, then you need to contemplate the fact that I can't let the valley go any further. Intellectually, if it's where you can't think about anything else, you're just obsessed about this, you're having trouble working, you're having trouble getting things done. In other words, it's not just hurting, but now it's actually causing you problems with the way you think. It's beginning to cause damage because you might wind up losing your job, or you might wind up making a mistake where that somebody else gets really hurt. Like, for example, if you're a surgeon or you're doing anything where safety of other people depends upon you being sharp. Emotionally, if you find yourself not just depressed, but agitated, full of anxiety, if you find yourself even becoming a little bit bipolar, I'm not saying you're bipolar. In other words, you find yourself fluctuating to the point that it's just miserable. Spiritually, if you find that your own beliefs and values are beginning to change so dramatically that you're becoming a different person, or that by what she's doing in that valley, her beliefs and values are changing so dramatically that she's becoming a different person, and I don't mean a better person. I mean a person that was not as good a person, if you'll allow me to say it that way, as she used to be. If that's happening to you or your children or to her, then it's time to say it's time to end the valley. Now, what do you do? That, Allison, is when you have to put boundaries in place.
Right.
If this happens, then here's the consequence. Or sometimes criteria. Criteria is different than a boundary in the fact that a criteria says this must happen. Now, if it does happen, here's the good thing that occurs. If it doesn't happen, here's the negative thing that occurs.
Right.
Maybe the best way to explain that is if somebody were doing an intervention with an alcoholic, for example, it would be, here's the boundary, you got to stop, but here's the criteria, you got to go to AA,
Right.
or you've got to go get dried out.
Right.
Now, we don't have time to explain that in detail, but you can find a podcast of ours. You can find it on marriageradio.com. You can find it on iTunes under Marriage Helper, Google Play under Marriage Helper, Spreaker, SPREAKER.com under Marriage Helper. We've got a podcast called The Definitive Guide to Boundaries. It's an hour and 15 minutes long. It's audio, not video, it's audio, but an hour and 15 minutes long where I explain in detail about how to do boundaries and how to do criteria. Now, let me see if I made it clear or if I just confused things, Allison. What did you hear me say the boundary is?
The boundary are things that you can set into place that if this happens again, then this will happen.
That's the boundary.
That's the boundary. And then the criteria is a positive thing that you can set in place that in order for this to happen, this needs to happen first.
The criteria is you must do this or there's a negative consequence.
Gotcha.
And if you do this, here's a positive consequence.
Okay.
And the valley itself, how did you understand I explained that? Here's the test right here in front of all these people.
Thank you. So the way that I describe the valley is just saying you have basically one foot in both worlds.
Okay. So you got things on both sides?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And that and what's the value of potentially letting them stand in the valley for a while?
You grow closer.
If that's occurring.
Right. If you are growing closer and making, positive connections and you see the relationship moving forward in a positive way, then it's okay to extend the valley.
For a while.
Not forever.
If you can.
Right. But if it's not, if it's negatively affecting you or your children, then it's okay to put those boundaries in place.
Okay, and maybe even beyond okay, it may even be essential.
Yes,
Because if it's doing damage physically, intellectually, emotionally, spiritually to you, your kids, if you have kids, or to your spouse, sometimes you just have to do that.
Right.
Now, people sometimes say, but if I put the boundaries into place, then that's going to be the end of everything. But we hope it's not. But sometimes, even if it did, it still has to happen because it's doing damage physically, intellectually, emotionally, spiritually.
Right, and that's the hard part of being in that position is you wish beforehand you would know, well, if I put this into place, then this is how they're going to react, and then you know what consequences you're dealing with.
Right.
For me personally, when he was in the valley and I put the boundary in place and he moved out, it instantly, within 3 days, he had cut things off, and within 2 weeks he was back living at home.
Praise God! I'm glad it worked that way.
Right, and so I do tell that story to people and say, not everyone is going to react that way. They may need to go the other route where they're full-fledged with the other person.
Sometimes it goes that way.
Right.
You see, we teach a system that if anything works, this does. If anything works, but we'll never tell you if you do exactly what we tell you, it's going to work 100%. The people that tell you that are the people that are after your money. You can find them all over the internet. They have all the answers, and if you do what they tell you, your marriage will be perfect. Just go ahead and put your money in a shredder because that's as much good as it's going to do. But we teach principles. But what Allison just said, we hope and pray the principles work, and it did for you right away.
Right.
For somebody else, it might take 3 months or 6 months.
Right.
For some others, it might not work at all.
Right.
But it was still the right thing to do.
It was, and I had to get to a point where I knew that either way it went, if it did go the other way and it meant that that was the end of my marriage for this time, I was okay with that. So before I made that decision, I made sure that I had a peace about it, that either way it goes, I have to be okay with that.
And that's good. That's very wise. Remember now, we have coaches available because if you're thinking, yeah, but I don't know how to make this decision by myself about what you're going to do, and we really do encourage you to be very, very careful about taking your counsel, your advice from your family and your friends, not because they're bad people, but because they love you. And by loving you, that can lead to very prejudiced answers because they're mad at the person that hurt you. And extremely careful about taking advice from people on Facebook, even if they're in some great group that you're in, because people tend to project their own situations onto you, and they're not always equal, right? But we have those coaches available, those people that you can call. And do you happen to know? I know our regular number. I don't know our toll-free number.
Oh, let's see. I believe it is 866-903-0990.
Okay, let's say that one more time.
Yes, 866-903-0990.
And you can call and ask for our client reps, and they'll guide you to whatever resource we have. If we have a resource that can help, we'll tell you. If our resources won't help, we'll tell you that too. Like, well, with that particular situation, we're not the best people to help you with. I actually said that to a guy just a couple of days ago. His wife's having severe mental problems. And so he said, should I bring her to the workshop? And my response was, no, we'd love to have you guys at the workshop someday, but right now you really need to get the help for those mental problems. I mean, she's mentally ill.
Right.
And we'll tell you when we can and when we can't, because our goal is to help you. That's why our 501c3 nonprofit exists, is to help you. Thank you for sitting in for Kimberly Holmes, our CEO.
Yes.
I appreciate that.
It was my pleasure.
At the time of this recording, Kimberly, or actually this live issue we're doing, Kimberly is in Israel with her husband Rob, having a great, wonderful time over there. But thank you for doing this. Now, how do people
for having me.
subscribe so they can get to this program? And if you don't mind, would you tell your friends? I mean, even put on your Facebook pages, hey guys, here's how you subscribe to Marriage Radio Live. Is that what we call this? What do we call this?
YouTube.
YouTube Live.
Yes. So you just want to subscribe to the Marriage Helper channel on YouTube.
YouTube. And if you'll please tell your buddies about that. I mean, put on your Facebook, your Twitter, whatever else. Hey, guys, you gotta subscribe to this. And I promise you we're going to do some programs, not just about marriage problems,
Right.
but about other aspects of relationships.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, my friend, for being with us.
Thank you for having me.
Okay, contact us at Marriage Helper, marriagehelper.com. Until our next live program, this is Dr. Joe Beam saying, have a great day.